I have a few people still joining, but I think we can go ahead and get started since we only have 30 minutes for the webinar this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're located. So hello, I am Sherry Budziak. I am the co-founder of .org Community and founder and CEO of .org Source. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. No tricks, just tactics, using data to drive learning program success. So let's get started. And I am going to turn off my camera and turn it over to Emily. So thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. And let me get my screen share set up. I hope everybody can see the slide that I've got up.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, well, let's get started. As Sherry said, we've only got 30 minutes, but wanted to give a quick welcome to everybody and just thank you for joining us for our webinar today. No tricks, just tactics, using data to drive learning program success. Very excited to have all of you here today as we dive into data. Many organizations are sitting on a wealth of learning program data, but a lot of times it might be fragmented, underutilized, or maybe just overwhelming, right? And metrics can hide across different platforms and programs, making it difficult to really extract clear strategic value. So for many organizations, the real fright lies not in the lack of data that they have access to, but in knowing how to use it effectively. So in this session, we're going to walk through a simple and continuous framework to help your organization focus on what matters most and really turn data into strategic action. But before we get into it, we're going to do quick introductions for me and Matt. My name is Emily Leary, and I lead our customer success team here at BenchPrep. I've been with BenchPrep going on 14 years now, and customer success is really focused on helping our customers build, launch, grow their programs, and also help them make the most of the data that our platform provides them and how they can use that to drive further program and learning success. I am typically based and live in Denver. However, actually calling in from our Chicago headquarters today, along with Matt, although we're in separate rooms so that we don't mess up the audio. But with that, I will pass it over to Matt to introduce himself.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Alberry, and I have the pleasure of leading the product organization at BenchPrep. I have been with BenchPrep now for 6 years. I live in Chicago and am joining from Chicago today. And prior to BenchPrep, led high-growth learning programs for 2 different Chicago area associations. So thanks for joining us. Okay, so just briefly, I wanted to provide a quick overview of BenchPrep. BenchPrep is an enterprise-grade revenue engine for learning organizations, monetizing the delivery of learning to external audiences. We employ a scalable and high-touch, mutual growth-centric business model and partner with leading associations, credentialing organizations, and for-profit companies like those you see on your screen. As an organization, we differentiate on data availability and insights that inform both learner success and learning program growth. And we really value the unique perspective that is afforded to us by partnering with these high-performing organizations. So now that you know a bit about BenchPrep, let's get into the framework. So today we're going to refer to this very simple cycle or framework in order to represent a methodology to operationalize data analysis to drive learning program growth. So just to quickly level set, we have 4 separate kind of actions here outlined. The first of which is specify. So in this respect, it's important to specify what your objectives are and what metrics would represent success. Next is collect, in that, of course, you'll need to collect the data that will ultimately be utilized for analysis and measurement of your objective achievement. Then to analyze, you must ensure that you have appropriate access to the data and ease of use for each critical stakeholder. And finally, we have action. And this, of course, is where data informs strategy and strategy is executed. So critical to this, of course, is the cyclical nature. This really must be a continuous process. And of course, upon taking action, you're going to want to assess if and the extent to which your action or actions are actually driving the intended impact. So now I'll pass back to Emily to walk you through specify in greater detail.
Great. So happy to take a look at the specify stage. And I will kick us off, but Matt might pass it back to you at some point as well.
Great.
But to make the concept a bit more tangible throughout the presentation, we're going to thread an example, very seasonally inspired learning organization called Haunters International through this presentation today. So very excited. I did not bring my costume. Matt and I joked that maybe we would come in costume. We did not. But with that, I'm actually going to pass it back over to Matt to take us through step one.
Great. Thank you. All right, so let's assume that Haunters International offers a certification program for which individuals must pass a high-stakes exam to certify. And they also offer online courses and practice exams to educate this high-stakes exam candidate on the related body of knowledge in advance of engaging with the test. So following the simple framework I mentioned moments ago, Haunters must first specify their objectives and identify key metrics that would inform achievement of those objectives. So in this case, as identified on the screen, Haunters strives to drive credentialing program growth by certifying more rising professionals. And their leadership has identified a hypothesis that reducing dropout rates among certification candidates that are currently in the pipeline will actually enable achievement of this. So their strategy is to focus on improving candidate competency and thus preparedness for exam day, and also ensuring candidate self-awareness of their exam readiness so they test at the appropriate time. So by driving increased engagement with their prep courses and practice exams, they expect to achieve this higher level objective of certification program growth. So now, having specified objectives, the Haunters team should now specify key metrics that will move the needle. In the next year, if they can reduce dropout rates among those with prep course or practice exam access by 10%, they expect they'll generate 10% more certification exam registration revenue, and that ultimately this will inform many more professionals engaging in their post-certification learning programs like continuing education. So Haunters starts with an ambitious but simple goal, and that is to increase the frequency of candidate engagement with their online course and practice exam offerings by 50% within the first month of those learners gaining access.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I love those goals and how specific they are with the measurement of those. So now let's move on to step 2 of the framework, now that the goals and objectives are specified and set. And data availability itself, right, is of course critical to setting a baseline and monitoring change over time and in response to different strategic tactics. So organizations need to ensure that they will have means of collecting the right data on an ongoing basis and as a starting point, right? And furthermore, it's actually very important that each stakeholder, right, who can actually influence the desired outcome has access to the data that they require. That's both accessible when and also how they need it, so they can analyze and then take the appropriate action related to it. So did want to take a moment to just talk about some example personas that at Hunters International will contribute to achieving the goals and metrics set out in step 1. And also how the data needs differ, right, for each of these stakeholders and how they play a role. So this is the team, a little snapshot of the team responsible for the Haunters learning program success. And you'll see that it does encompass many personas, and they have, slightly different but related objectives to what we saw in step 1 and what was set out from a leadership perspective. And each requires access to the data that's more relevant to their focus area in order to play a role in achieving their overall goal. So let's look at a few of these influential personas. The first is content administrators. These folks are responsible for driving learning outcomes and require data more pertaining to learner engagement and performance, right? And ideally, this data is coming from the platform where learners are engaging with course content and different items. And they need that data so that they can take action to continuously improve the content quality and ultimately the learning experience, which is gonna get those candidates ready for the exam that much quicker. So ultimately, right, if the candidates don't find value in the course and the practice experience, they're more likely to disengage and potentially drop out and never sit for that exam. Now, instructors are responsible for facilitating efficient paths to competency and require data that's primarily relates to the competency and the performance of how potentially individuals or groups of students are performing, right? Again, within the platform where that learning is delivered, so that they can tailor cohort and again, individual learner level learning plans and actions that optimize those learning outcomes. Because the Haunters candidates are going to benefit from those subject matter experts and that personalized guidance that instructors can provide. And finally, we have marketers. And the marketers are responsible for informing the conversion of those engaging in learning programs to test takers, right? And so they're going to require data related to the engagement or potentially lack thereof. Also, performance data of those learners, maybe some assessment data or kind of readiness data as well. And ideally, they're looking potentially to get this data in exportable or potentially editable formats, or maybe even directly integrated into marketing platforms that they're using so that they can segment and tailor communications that will compel engagement within the course and ultimately exam registration and completion. Because if candidates aren't reminded, or if they're not even aware, right, maybe of some of the things that they've purchased and the value that these prep products have and where they can focus their efforts or when they're ready to test, again, they might be more likely to drop out and delay testing and ultimately not see Hunters International reach its goal. So now that we've talked a little bit about the personas and the data they're going to be looking to collect and where to collect it, I do want to acknowledge that data maturity and acumen will also vary across different organizations, departments, and individuals. And that ultimately may inform the strategic impact that you're capable of creating through analysis. And just for an example, we see that the more mature organizations may have on-staff data analysts, right? That they're able to leverage data warehouses or large data sets of raw data, right? Potentially in spreadsheets that would enable them to create more custom queries and custom reports and different visualizations, right? And then be able to, potentially automate the delivery of those to different stakeholders within the organizations. However, there also are very much smaller organizations, potentially less savvy organizations, where they're more likely to rely on some of the standardized out-of-the-box platform dashboards or reports that are available, which may include more things like at-a-glance highlights or some tables that are available and kind of some of the preset interactive visualizations. But regardless of where you stand as an organization, the collection and access of data is really critical to drive that learning program success. And I'll pass it back to Matt to take us through step 3.
Thanks, Emily. So we hope that whatever learning platform or platforms your organization employs, that you are provided access to personalized, persona-specific, and in-application data and analytics, robust raw learning program data, potentially in a powerful warehousing solution like Snowflake, interoperable data via APIs and real-time webhooks, which can be delivered to external systems, and potentially even via professional services and consultative customer success management, ensuring that key stakeholders each have access to the right data for their responsibilities at the right levels and in the right places and formats, ultimately enables efficient and more effective analysis. So as a reminder, there should be a hierarchy of goals, starting with high-level organizational goals, and then with each functional area formulating specific goals that roll up to that overall goal or goals. So let's look at the marketing persona as a specific example and in the context of driving engagement with the prep products. And let's assume that the Haunters marketing team leverages comprehensive data about engagement with those prep products to examine commonalities about those who never test. And in doing so, they identify that among individuals with prep course or practice exam access in the previous year, 30% of those individuals never registered for and completed the test. And among those 30%, on average, 75% disengaged with those prep products within the first 2 weeks of gaining access. So having identified this, the marketing team recognizes an opportunity to play a role in driving greater test rates by compelling extended learner engagement. So they set a goal to compel all candidates to engage in prep experiences beyond the first 2 weeks of access, and to continue to compel engagement thereafter until those individuals register for and sit for the certification exam. So similarly now, looking at the instructor persona that Emily previously alluded to, let's assume that an instructor observes that individuals in their cohort are consistently performing poorly on practice questions, indicating low confidence, and taking a high volume of notes across the same 3 content categories. In this case, an instructor can infer that this may be a particularly challenging subject matter that demands more instructor intervention and learner engagement, so they decide to focus more effort on these specific categories, potentially creating and prescribing self-paced curriculums, and offering focused virtual instructor-led training sessions or office hours to augment the self-paced content.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And let's move on to the 4th step in the framework now, which is action. And so now that Haunters is equipped with specific organization level objectives, in this case, the credentialing program growth via increased prep product engagement, we've also talked about robust data collection that's aligned to the needs of those different personas, and also analysis that can identify the different challenges and opportunities, such as that prep product disengagement that Matt just showed us, and also some of the challenges with subject matter. Haunters can now take action. And a simple way to do this, right, or kind of to frame this, is to convert insights into an action statement like we have on the screen here. Empowered with this data, we will what? So referring back to that marketing persona now, we're going to take a look at how the Haunters international marketers are taking action based on analysis and how they'll measure impact to continuously inform refinement of that strategy. So The Hunters marketing team is aspiring to compel all candidates to engage in prep experiences within and beyond the first 2 weeks, and to continue to compel engagement thereafter. So they decide to employ 3 new actions. First, they introduce new onboarding communication sent to individuals immediately upon gaining access to their prep products, inclusive of helpful tips related to scheduling, features, and related resources. Next, they employ both scheduled and learning activity triggered in-app communications, such as banner messages. And finally, they leverage real-time event-based webhooks to trigger timely and personalized emails from their marketing automation system, including those that pertain to periods of inactivity, celebrating milestones that they have achieved, and even notification of potential exam registration readiness to compel registration and scheduling of that exam. And importantly, they also established a process for continuous monitoring of those metrics, such that they can continuously improve and iterate upon the strategy that they have set out. So let's assume that in monitoring results, the marketing team observes some level of success. Yay, marketing team. And they identify that the onboarding emails appear to be driving slightly more immediate engagement with the prep courses. The event-based emails are effectively driving increased frequency of engagement on an ongoing basis, and the in-app messages are effective in driving purchases of additional premium content offerings, and also utilization of high-impact features like configurable practice exams that can emulate the actual test day experience. But the team isn't satisfied, right? They've started to see success and they've seen some modest gains, but they decide to adjust their strategy a little bit to just further optimize impact even more. So they start introducing a weekly automated email cadence that now has recipient segmentation based on course progress. So the messages are more tailored based on how much of the course those candidates have achieved. They also double down on those automated event-based emails to continuously recognize the commitment and the achievements as a motivational tactic. And they continue using those in-app messages to continue to encourage the utilization of those right features at the right time. And I know this was a lot and the marketing team did a lot, but and I trust that all of you on this webinar too are striving to accomplish a lot, and that the constant demand for kind of net new deliverables consumes a lot of your focus. But it is very important to get in the habit of planning, right, and iterating on an ongoing basis, and making sure you're allocating the resources so that you're continuously going back through the tracking, iterating, testing, and kind of repeating and tweaking your strategies as you work through data analysis and then said action. I'll pass it over to Matt to talk a little bit about the learner.
Yeah, thanks again. So everything we've talked about, specifying goals, collecting data, analyzing trends, and taking action, ultimately ladders up to one outcome: better experiences and results for learners. When administrators use data to improve content, to personalize engagement, remove friction points, etc., learners are likely to study more, but they're also likely to learn more effectively and more efficiently. Learners gain an understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, and as a result, can focus their learning investment and gain greater confidence. This all translates to accelerated mastery, higher certification pass rates, and greater satisfaction overall. And it's a powerful reminder that behind every data point that is collected, there is a learner that is pursuing acquisition of those skills and knowledge, the confidence to test, and the learning and credentialing outcomes that ultimately drive your organizations forward. So as we approach the end of our 30 minutes here, I'll acknowledge we have attempted to cover a lot, ultimately from a very simplistic and high-level view, and introducing this kind of simplistic and repeatable framework or cycle. We have identified example persona level examples, including how the needs differ by persona, and even simple examples of analysis of that data informing strategic action. So with every iteration, your strategy is going to become a little smarter, your programs are going to become stronger, and your learners are going to see greater success. And it's, of course, not at all about perfection. It's really more so about iteration. The more the wheel turns, the better your strategy is refined and drives better outcomes. So our simple advice is to start with simple objectives, collect the data that matters, analyze with intention, action, test, and repeat. And that's how you turn insight into impact.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. And really quick before Q&A, I did just want to share a little bit about an upcoming webinar that we have with our CEO, what leading associations did differently with learning in 2025 and why it worked. You can use the QR code on the slide to register. So Ashish, our CEO, is going to break down what worked in 2025, from rethinking how learning fits into the overall member value proposition to leveraging emerging technologies and experimenting with new business models. So great opportunity to get insights that help you prepare for 2026 and beyond. But with that, I do think we have a couple minutes for Q&A. I don't know if there's anything in the chat or the Q&A.
Thanks, Matt, Emily, appreciate it. Great information. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and share those in the Q&A, and we can take a couple questions here as we reach the top of the hour. But I have a question for you. What data have you found that's most valuable for learners to have access to?
Yeah, great questions, Sherry. So, I mean, high level, we have found that learners really want and should be able to know where they stand pretty quickly and intuitively, and be able to use that data to take action. So we have found performance data, ideally at competency levels across all their courses, to be really important in that regard, especially in the use case we were talking about with Hunters International on the kind of test prep and preparing for certification side of it. And so different tools like analytics dashboards and potentially practice exams that will help them get there and use that data to take action are important. But then also when you're talking about CE or credentialing, being able to quickly see, how much you've completed or what courses you need to complete in order to gain continuing education credits or remain certified is also critically important as well. So ease of access and the right data for the right objective.
Great. We do have a question. How do you move from action ideas to actually creating the structure? And what's the time needed for execution?
Do you want to take that, Matt, or you want me to take a stab at it?
Sure, I can take a stab, but welcome you to jump in. So, of course, ultimately, every organization has challenges in terms of gaining alignment on what the critical objectives are, ensuring that you have focus and aligned resources. And so ultimately having the data to tell the story about where there may be a problem or an opportunity helps to inform the proposal that you may take to leadership and ultimately seek to gain alignment around. It is oftentimes challenging, and even once you have gained that alignment, ensuring that you have access to the appropriate resources, that the marketing team, the instructors, content managers, and everyone internally is aligned to that objective, that they're identifying the objectives that are specific to their functional area, devising strategies, determining what resources they need to action them, etc. So, of course, our framework was simplistic, but we recognize that the goals can be aspirational and different in scope. And so ultimately, I think it all starts with presenting the story and building consensus.
Yeah.
And
I would,
oh, sorry, Emily.
I was just going to add quickly on that. I think something too, just to keep in mind, is oftentimes so many ideas can come from data and different things that you can do, and definitely recommend that you limit that to maybe 1 to 3 ideas that you're actually going to take action on. If you pick too many, it's going to be too complicated. You're not going to be able to really understand whether or not what's actually having the impact or lack thereof. So I would always recommend starting small, especially if buy-in is harder. Pick one, right? That might not take as much time or resources to put into motion. And then again, per the presentation, make sure you have the data that you can show the impact of that action. And if you continue to see improvement from that, then hopefully you'll get further buy-in as well to keep investing in it.
Great, thank you. And before we wrap up, just one more question. Somebody's asking, do you have insights on if the platform or instruction usability impacts user engagement? I mean, I would say yes, but what are your guys' thoughts on kind of usability and if it impacts user engagement?
Yeah, certainly. So, of course, the platform, the intuitiveness of the learning experience and how learners navigate, how they gain insight into where they should focus and actually access relevant content and experiences is critically important. Of course, there are numerous authoring solutions in the market, and some are very well suited for specific learning use cases. So, it's always helpful to understand what your objective is, what you're trying to facilitate in terms of learning outcomes, and align your authoring approach to that. Similarly, I would encourage you to give thought to what data needs to be captured out of that learning experience, and that can inform if you are purchasing or publishing rather to a specific e-learning standard or otherwise. So certainly a lot of considerations that I know you are all facing, but Emily and I, of course, and our teams are happy to be a resource anytime you have questions about any of this.
Well, thank you both very much. And thanks for staying on a couple extra minutes to answer the questions. We appreciate you joining us today and everybody who joined us live. We appreciate you being here, and thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Great.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Take care.